SLT Mobitel, the connection. SLT Mobitel, the connection.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, gearing for the jab. Sri Lanka all set for the national COVID-19 inoculation program with first batch of vaccine expected tomorrow.
The 250,000 is the first step. Vaccinations cannot be made compulsory in this case. It is absolutely voluntary.
Big jump. Sri Lanka records its highest number of daily recoveries in the excess of 1,500. Under the microscope, former director of the CID Shani Abesekar insists that former President Maithripala Sirisena could not have been kept in the dark on foreign intel about the Easter Sunday attacks. Unpleased, port trade unions planning a mega trade union action this Friday. All that and much more coming up on First at 9, this Wednesday the 27th of January 2021.
Buy a 2-litre Coke and get a glass free.
ඇල්කොහොල් අඩංගු hand sanitizer භාවිත කරන්න. ලෙඩ රෝග ඇති කරන විෂ බීජවලට එරෙහිව සටන් කරන්න. හඳුන්වා දීමේ මිල රුපියල් 350යි.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammika Ekanayakan. Let's start with your local stories. Sri Lanka will be receiving its first consignment of COVID-19 vaccines doses tomorrow, and the inoculation will start on Friday, giving priority to the frontline workers. In a media briefing this morning, Chief Advisor to the President, Lalit Veeratunga, expressed confidence of vaccinating 50 to 60% of the target group within this year. What's more, the national inoculation program will not be made mandatory, and it will be left as a completely voluntary exercise.
The 250,000 is just a single step, the first step. And I think the first step has been taken well. We did not at any point of time exert any influence on the NMRA. So once they said we need about a week, we will look at all the data that various authorities gave them. Having looked at that, they said, fine, this can be used here. And this can be used here as an emergency vaccine. When will this be completed? I don't think even countries which produce the vaccine, even they are able to say how much of their people can be vaccinated. For instance, just this morning, China said 22 million of over a billion people have been vaccinated so far. It's a very small number compared to their population. We have lined ourselves up in the world competitive stage to get the vaccine from various institutes. But right now what we have is AstraZeneca, for which we have placed orders. But if the Sputnik and the Sinopharm also gets approved, then we will also have a combination of vaccines. I strongly feel that there will be a combination of vaccines, and we need to make sure that this combination is very timely received and timely used. Hopefully, very tentatively I can say, at least 50 to 60% of the target group that we are looking at, we believe can be vaccinated during the course of the year. It can even be faster. In regard to the Sinopharm, China has very graciously said we will donate 300,000. Once the NMRA goes through its studies and they say, okay, if the Sinopharm is also good to be used, then we can start the procurement process.
Chief Presidential Advisor Lalit Veeratunga, who heads the task force appointed to oversee the vaccination drive, also touched on the government's plans to purchase 3 million doses of COVID-19 vaccine.
Well, we have just sent out the expression of interest to buy. So we will have to go through certain procurement procedures of the government because this is within the national procurement systems. But it will happen very fast. But the 3 million that we want to purchase, although we have shown our interest that we should get it as early as possible, we may have to wait until the institute, that is the Serum Institute, tells us, okay, this is the delivery period. These are not off-the-shelf products. These have to be on order. Obviously, they are producing, but Sri Lanka will also have to in the line and say, we need so much. So that we have placed.
On the question whether there will be private sector involvement in the national immunisation programme, Veeratunga had this to say.
The national immunization program or the national vaccination program does not factor in the private sector hospitals to administer the vaccine, particularly not this one. Because this is an emergency situation. Only the government vaccination points will do that at the best level of operation or even the optimum level of operation. The health ministry even envisages having about 4,000 vaccination points through which a vaccination can take place. Each vaccination point is just not a place where you can give the jab, but you need to have post-vaccination aftercare. There can be a complexity somewhere, someone might faint, someone might vomit, all sorts of things can happen. So when you think of all this, it is not advisable right now to allow the private sector to do that. The private sector has very willingly said the government does not have to bear the cost of the vaccines given to the private sector employees, that they would also like to chip in. We still have not calculated as to how much, but we know what the working population needs. Not all the employers would want to do that, but whoever who wants, we will provide a pathway for that. But for any other citizen, even for the private sector employee who will be included in the national vaccination program, this is absolutely free of charge.
Veeratunga also clarified whether COVID-19 immunisation is compulsory or not.
Vaccinations cannot be made compulsory, in this case, because this is an emergency vaccine. It is absolutely voluntary, because whenever someone comes for vaccination, we will invite people for vaccination depending on the age groups. We are using the data from the National Election Commission at the MOH level, at the Gramanildari level, so that we know who the people are of a particular age group. But we will also get them to sign a note. Well, I am doing this voluntarily. I am not under any compulsion. There is no way that we can compel people, and we will not. So very clearly, it's a voluntary activity offered to the people, which people, in my understanding, should make use of.
What if some frontline workers refuse the vaccine?
Well, it's at their own risk. They are frontline people who are meeting possible or potential COVID-19 patients face to face. If they think they can look after themselves, why not? There is no way that we want to compel. But on the other hand, there is a huge demand from the frontline health workers. So I see that there is a huge majority which wants the vaccine. Now, some people phoned me and said, my name is not in the electoral register. How would you take me in? We are now contemplating this, and then we might run an advertisement in all the national newspapers, and we will also give wide publicity. If your name does not appear in the electoral register, please send us a little note, or we will give a format, fill it up and send it to us. We will also make it electronically available, or even an SMS, so that they are also taken in. So we have time to do that. We will very quickly start this process.
In the above 60, it is that we are encouraging all above 60 to come, irrespective of whether they have a problem or not. Similarly, even 50 to 59, we are encouraging and appealing to the people who have a problem, but even if they don't know that they have a problem, they don't have to go and check before they come whether they have diabetes or not, whether they have high blood pressure or not. No need to check those things. Just come for the immunization.
In the meantime, Deputy Director General of Public Health Services Dr. Hemantha Herath elaborated on what the process will be once the government takes delivery of the first batch of vaccine doses.
Government will officially take over this consignment from the Indian government, and it will be sent to the central vaccine stores at the Ministry of Health, and from there immediately they will be distributed among the 26 regional medical supplies divisions throughout the country. And the hospitals have already prepared the list of employees who are supposed to get this vaccine, and they will start the immunizing their staff immediately. And in this regard, the Ministry of Health has already decided to start this immunization program in 6 hospitals selected in and around Colombo, including the National Hospital Hospital, Colombo, Colombo South Teaching Hospital, Colombo North Teaching Hospital, Base Hospital, Homagama, Colombo East Base Hospital, and the National Institute of Infectious Disease, or the so-called IDH Hospital in Angoda.
Pay just 500,000 rupees to reserve your unit today. Mulberry Residence.
Now, the European Union has yet again voiced its strong concerns about Sri Lanka's import restrictions, adding that open and fair trade requires a level playing field. During the meeting of EU-Sri Lanka Joint Commission recently, EU had called on Sri Lanka to amend the Prevention of Terrorism Act and bring it in line with international standards.
The European Union and Sri Lanka held their 23rd meeting of the Joint Commission on Monday via video conference, the first under the new leadership in both the EU and Sri Lanka. The Joint Commission had acknowledged that there was potential for Sri Lanka to make even better use of the GSP Plus tariff concessions granted to Sri Lanka, and in this regard, among other things, the EU also stressed that open and fair trade requires a level playing field and expressed its strong concerns about Sri Lanka's import restrictions imposed since April 2020 following COVID, which have a negative impact on European businesses. The EU had urged Sri Lanka to notify these measures to the World Trade Organization. Sri Lanka had reaffirmed the commitments made to effectively implement the 27 international conventions covered by the GSP Plus scheme on human and labour rights, environment and good governance. In this context, the EU had reiterated the need for Sri Lanka to amend the Prevention of Terrorism Act and bring it in line with international standards. The EU, meanwhile, had also expressed regret on Sri Lanka's withdrawal from its co-sponsorship of the UN Human Rights Council Resolution 30/1 and subsequent resolutions that incorporated and built on it. Sri Lanka had explained how it would advance national reconciliation and action taken in accordance with its constitution and laws. The EU had reiterated the importance of fostering reconciliation, justice, accountability and peaceful coexistence among Sri Lanka's diverse communities and underlined the important role of the independent institutions established in recent years, notably the Office on Missing Persons, the Office for Reparations and the Human Rights Commission. Meanwhile, it was also revealed during the Joint Commission meeting that the EU-Sri Lanka Working Group on Development Cooperation appraised positively 3 grants from the European Union worth €35.75 million, which will support Sri Lanka's justice sector, help improve food safety and strengthen efforts to mitigate climate change. The EU had also stressed the importance of applying international human rights standards in the fight against terrorism.
We will see you once more after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, State Minister Arundhika Fernando has tested positive for COVID-19, becoming the 7th parliamentarian to do so. Reportedly, the State Minister had participated in one of Sri Lanka Podujana Peremuna's electorate meetings held on Monday. On a more positive note, Sri Lanka recorded its highest single-day tally of COVID-19 recoveries, with 1,520 patients being permitted to return to their daily lives today.
Chief of the National Operations Centre for the Prevention of COVID-19, Army Commander General Shavendra Silva confirmed that 311 fresh cases were confirmed during the day so far. Meanwhile, State Minister Arundhika Fernando today joined the list of MPs to have contracted the virus. Fernando is the 7th parliamentarian to test positive for COVID-19. He, however, had tested negative during a PCR test conducted at the parliament recently. Due to being in ill health, the State Minister had undergone a PCR test at a private hospital, following which he was diagnosed with the virus. State Minister Fernando had participated in the SLPP's Pathadumbra electorate meeting held on Monday. It is reported that the State Minister had also participated in meetings held in Valapane and Norelia to discuss the development of the Kithul industry. He had also held a media briefing at his ministry yesterday. State Minister Dayasiri Jayasekara and Piyal Nishanta, Ministers Vasudeva Nanayakara and Pavitra Vanyarachi, as well as MPs Vasantayapa Bandara and Rauf Hakim, were already identified as infected. Dayasiri Jayasekara and Vasudeva Nanayakara have since recovered and have returned home. Meanwhile, PCR tests conducted on the family members of MP Vasantayapa Bandara, who tested positive recently, and his staff have returned negative results. Health authorities took measures to take the MP to the Theldenia Base Hospital this afternoon. Meanwhile, during a special operation launched by the police today, 15 persons who frequented the Badula district without wearing face masks were apprehended. Police also advised business outlets in the city which did not provide hand-washing facilities and disinfectants. In the meantime, Sri Lanka continues to record daily cases in the excess of 700 as the island confirmed 755 infections during the course of yesterday. The infection spanned across 18 districts and not so surprisingly, Colombo recorded the highest number of infections with 369. Outside Colombo, the top 5 districts with the highest number of cases were Gampaha with 124 infections, Kalutara with 80, Kurunagala with 29 cases, Kandy with 23 patients, while Matale confirmed 22 cases. In the meantime, one COVID-19 related fatality was reported yesterday, raising the country's total number of COVID-19 related deaths to 288. The deceased is a 71-year-old woman from Ragama, whose cause of death was determined as COVID-19 pneumonia and septicemia. On a more positive note, Sri Lanka saw its highest daily recoveries today, with 1,520 patients being given the all clear to go home. With that, the total number of recoveries in the island is placed at 52,566, leaving 7,379 active cases.
Now then, Minister of Education Professor G.L. Peiris lauds the private sector performance during the COVID-19 pandemic. Speaking at the National Conference on COVID-19 Impact, Mitigation, Opportunities and Resilience this morning, he said that the response given by the apparel sector in particular during the COVID-19 period is magnificent.
We are all genuinely proud of the performance of the private sector in this country. The economy took a drastic hit because Sri Lanka derives foreign exchange principally from 3 sources. One is our exports, in particular our garment exports, tea and so on. The second is tourism. The third is remittances from Sri Lankans working abroad and sending back their savings to the Sri Lankan exchequer. So that is the throbbing heart of Sri Lanka's economy. All of them were affected. But now consider for a moment how the apparel sector responded. It is really a magnificent achievement when you compare export earnings year on year. If you compare, for instance, September 2020 with September 2019, there was actually an increase. How did this happen? Given the enormity, the magnitude of the challenge, how was it possible for Sri Lankan companies to perform at a level which enabled them to not only to retain their level of performance, but actually marginally to earn a little more than they did in the previous year, notwithstanding COVID-19. How did this become possible? It became possible because of resilience, adaptability, and innovation. What our large companies did was they changed the products that they were turning out into the market. The traditional products were for niche markets. You know, Sri Lanka had made the decision early on that we can't compete on considerations of scale with other countries. If we produce, shirts, pants, that kind of thing, is not possible. Countries like Bangladesh are far better poised in terms of population and other considerations. So our companies made the strategic decision that they would go into other areas, swimwear, sportswear, for niche markets, expensive items for selected markets. And Sri Lanka's apparel companies were among the best performances in the world. But when COVID-19 hit them, there was no market for swimwear, sportswear and so on. The market became depressed overnight without any warning. What did they do? They changed dramatically the kind of thing that they were producing. They went into personal protection equipment, PPEs. They received huge orders from the United Kingdom, from the United States, huge orders. They couldn't cope with those orders. And the large companies passed on some of these orders to the smaller companies. That enabled retrenchment to be reduced to a minimum. Employees could still be retained. What better example of resilience? That had nothing to do with government. Our exports did not suffer very much. In some sectors, as I said, the performance was actually improved.
In other stories, former director of the Criminal Investigation Department, Shani Abesekara, says that former governor of the Western Province, Azad Sali, wanted 2 of the suspects arrested over the Vanatavillu explosives released. Giving evidence before the Presidential Commission of Inquiry probing the Easter Sunday terror attacks, Abesekara aired his doubts over ISIS involvement in the massacres, saying that none of the probes uncovered the extremist terror cell's links to the attack. Former Director of the Criminal Investigation Department, Shania Abesekara, gave evidence before the Presidential Commission of Inquiry probing the Easter Sunday terror attacks yesterday. Towards the latter part of the proceedings, the chairman of the commission asked the witness whether it was owing to a report by the witness and the former senior DIG in charge of the CID, Ravi Seneviratne, that the court conditionally released 2 of the 4 suspects on the 10th of April 2019, arrested over the discovery of explosives in Vanathavillu on the 16th of January 2019. The former CID director responded, quote, "During a meeting with the Defence Secretary, then Governor of the Western Province, Azad Saleh, made a request to release the 2 suspects. But I clearly said that they cannot be released until investigations are over. Then, since IP Marasinghe, who conducted the investigation, concluded the probe and reported that the 2 suspects are not linked to the Vanathavillu explosives, I and the senior DIG consented to the suspects being released via the legal process," unquote. Then the senior state counsel asked the witness whether he handed over court produce to the foreign investigators who arrived in the country following the string of terror attacks. The response of Shania Abesekara was that though 2 media institutions had given publicity to such a statement made by the Chief Inspector of the CID, Lalit Disanayake, he did not give court produce to a third party. He, however, added that the foreign investigators were later permitted to inspect the court produce via the court process. What's more, Abesekara went on to note that he had been in the police service for 32 years and that allegations levelled at other officers are not levelled against him, adding that he does not even receive half of the salary recommended by the Police Commission. In the meantime, the senior state counsel quizzed the former CID director on the forewarning given by foreign intelligence agencies, which was exchanged among intelligence units. In reply, Shania Abesekara said, quote, "I do not know whether Nilantha Jayawardena properly communicated this information to former President Maithripala Sirisena or not, but it cannot be accepted that he did not inform these facts. I clearly know that the Director of the State Intelligence Service keeps the President informed on state security, politics, public protests and other matters on a daily basis. It is the original piece of information that goes to the President, so it cannot be that the President did not know about it. The President summoned us to the Presidential Secretariat to tell us not to give evidence before the Parliamentary Select Committee. There he said that he wasn't informed, but he did not ask from Nilantha as to why he wasn't informed," unquote. Former director of the CID, Shania Abesekara, went on to say, quote, "None of the investigations revealed that the ISIS was behind the attack. The leader of a terrorist outfit has never been a suicide bomber and had died during an attack. The leader deploys followers for an attack. As such, Zahran dying as a suicide bomber is a puzzle to us, since we identified Zahran as the leader during our investigations. It is a question to me whether a clandestine hand was behind the attack or whether another person or faction orchestrated Zahran," unquote. With the testimony of the former CID director, the Presidential Commission concluded its evidence recording, which lasted over a year, with 440 witnesses giving evidence before it. General Manager and Head of English News at AdaDerana 24, our very own Indiveri Amuatta was recognized with the award for Inspirational Woman of the Year in Electronic Media during the Top 50 Professional and Career Women Awards 2020 worked off last evening. Presented by Women in Management, Top 50 Professional and Career Women Awards 2020 demonstrates the significant role women play in bringing about transformational change as employees, entrepreneurs and leaders.
Felicitating inspirational women of the island for the 10th year, the Top 50 Professional and Career Women Awards Sri Lanka 2020 was worked off in Colombo last evening. An initiative by Women in Management in collaboration with Women in Work, International Finance Corporation, a member of the World Bank Group, and the Government of Australia, the awards recognized and celebrated 50 inspiring Sri Lankan women who have excelled in their careers, businesses and everyday life.
Derana, Indiveri Amuatta.
AdaDerana's Indiveri Amuatta was honoured with the Gold Award for Inspirational Woman of the Year in Electronic Media for her inspirational body of work via platforms of electronic media.
Internationally, she was recognized for
Amuatta, General Manager and Head of English News for AdaDerana 24, who has been recognized for her work both locally and internationally, hosts AdaDerana's marquee talk show at Hyde Park, which was named among Asia's top talk shows at the 2020 Asian Television Awards. She has so far reported on terrorism and its impact on Sri Lankan society during the height of the country's civil war and covered a myriad of stories from politics to extremism. Meanwhile, among other award recipients was the Group Chief Executive Officer of Hema's Group, Kasturi Chellaraja Wilson, who won the Trailblazer Award. Chairperson of Candeg's Handlooms, Sita Yahampath, was recognized as the Business Role Model of the Year for leading the way for women in business.
Business Role Model of the Year.
Chairman of Jetwing Symphony PLC, Hiran Kure, was also felicitated last night as the male champion of change. Director General of Sri Lanka Standards Institution, Dr. Siddhika Senaratne, was recognized with the award for Woman of the Year in Career Leadership. This year's awards also saw a special felicitation for those who contributed to the fight against COVID-19, including medical practitioners, the police and the army. Professor at the University of Sri Jayawardhanapura, Neelika Malavige, was given the Inspirational Woman Award for her research work on COVID-19.
University of Oxford. She is also a member of the Executive Committee of the International Society of Infectious Diseases and has been instrumental.
First woman Deputy Inspector General of Police to be appointed in the country, Bimsha Nija Singarachi, was felicitated with the Woman of the Year Award under the Defence Force and Civil Society category. A team of rubber-tied gantry crane operators at the Sri Lanka Ports Authority were recognized as change makers for women for their valuable services.
Now, in other local news, the port trade unions have decided to launch a mega trade union action from Friday. Now, they have been urging the government to develop the East Container Terminal at the Colombo port with locally sourced funds, sans foreign investment. The unionists claim that they will take every measure needed to safeguard the East Container Terminal. Addressing a media briefing, they say that even foreign investment, with Sri Lanka retaining a 51% stake, will not do, and are adamant that the country should retain 100% ownership of the terminal. After previously saying that India's Adani Group is set to invest, they now say that a multinational company within the port is attempting to take the terminal over. We will see you shortly. Bear with us. Welcome back. This is First at 9. Now, State Minister of Money, Capital Market and State Enterprise Reforms, Ajit Nivard Cabral, says that the country at least requires a capital of $2 to $3 billion in order to fulfill the economic aspirations of the nation. He made this remark while addressing the 62nd Annual General Meeting of the National Chamber of Commerce of Sri Lanka.
From 2006 to 2014, one of the key thrusts of the strategy at that time was to maintain those macro fundamentals at reasonable, benign levels. We had to quickly get back to that situation. That's why you would have noticed from 2020, we were determined that those macro fundamentals are brought back, because that is the only way that we can have growth once again in our country. No one can grow if not for the fact that the platform is a stable one and it is a benign one. So even under the worst of circumstances, where we found export stuff, tourism dwindling, we had some resilient businesses who did not accept those as the conditions that we should falter on, but rather to build upon. So that is why our exports reduced by only $1 billion in the year 2020, although many of the rating agencies jumped the gun and thought that we'll have a much higher deficit as far as our exports are concerned. Because we took the early steps as far as imports were concerned, imports reduced by about $3 billion for the year 2020. As a result, our trade deficit was actually lower by about $2 billion than the previous year, which put a very little pressure on the rupee, and that's why we were able to survive the almost zero tourism receipts that we had in the year 2020. The platform is now set with the return of tourism, albeit gradually, we would find that Sri Lanka would once again be in a position to attain that 4 to 5% growth in the year 2021. And we must strive for that, because I believe the platform for our growth in the next 5 years will be based on how we manage the year 2021. We are also opening out the country. We have opened out new areas. The new law for the port city is coming in the next few weeks. That would ensure that recipients of investments can be taken by the country. Already we have had some very good responses. Even though with COVID, there are many people who have come and they are taking up positions. And we are confident that very soon those investments will materialize in real dollar terms.
The State Minister added a further $2 to $3 billion coming into Sri Lanka will be enough fresh infusion of capital into the country.
In Sri Lanka, one of the biggest drawbacks for the fulfillment of these dreams has been that there has not been enough capital in our country. I think at least $2 or $3 billion needs to come in. We are working hard towards that, to bring in that fresh infusion of capital into the country.
Now, at the Colombo Bourse, the all-share price index gained 146.19 points to close at yet another new all-time high of 8,812.01. The S&P SL index of more liquid stocks, meanwhile, gained 1.28 points to close at 3,505.33. The market turnover was 14.4 billion rupees, where 74 stocks gained and 150 fell. Now, here's a brief report on today's market performance.
Today we saw another massive surge in the index as the ASPI climbed by 146 points to close at an all-time high, surging past the 8,800 mark as well. So with this, we are seeing a renewed buying interest continuing in the market, this despite the short-lived selling pressure that we saw yesterday. Foreign outflow was heavy during the day of 1.3 billion rupees.
Now, the rupee closed at 192.25 cents to 193 against the US dollar today, firmer from yesterday's 195.50 cents to 196.50 cents levels. Now, let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.